The morning sun broke through the thin curtains of the small apartment in Accra, Ghana, casting warm light across the floor where Kwame Osi sat cross-legged. His fingers moved swiftly over a paper keyboard he had carefully drawn on the back of an old poster. The 12-year-old's eyes were closed, his head swaying gently as if he could actually hear the music his silent fingers were creating. "Kwame, you'll be late for school." His mother's voice called from the tiny kitchen where the smell of fried plantains filled the air. Kwame sighed, carefully folding his paper keyboard and tucking it into his school bag. This was his morning ritual, 20 minutes of practice before rushing off to school. He had never owned a real piano, but that hadn't stopped him from falling in love with the instrument 3 years ago when a visiting music teacher had played at his school assembly. "Coming, Mama," he called back, grabbing his worn blue uniform shirt from the chair beside him. Akosua Ose was already packing his lunch when he entered the kitchen. Despite the early hour, she was dressed for her first job at the hotel where she cleaned rooms. Her second job at a local restaurant wouldn't start until late afternoon. "You were playing your paper piano again?" she asked, a small smile crossing her tired face. Kwame nodded, quickly eating the plantains she'd placed on a chipped plate. "I learned a new song in my head last night. I heard it from the radio at Mr. Kuzi's shop." His mother ruffled his short curly hair. "One day, my son, one day you will have a real piano." Kwame beamed at her. They both knew they couldn't afford even a keyboard, but neither mentioned this fact. Dreams were precious things in their household, not to be dismissed but carefully protected. The walk to school took Kwame past the Golden Leaf Hotel, the fanciest building in their neighborhood. Sometimes, if he was early enough, he would slip through the service entrance that the kitchen staff left propped open during breakfast deliveries. The hotel had a beautiful grand piano in the lobby that no one seemed to play. Today was one of those days. Kwame checked his watch, a gift from his uncle last Christmas, and saw he had 30 minutes before school started. Enough time for a quick detour. The kitchen staff knew him by now. Old Tawia, who supervised the morning deliveries, pretended not to see as Kwame slipped through, though sometimes he would wink at the boy when no one else was looking. The lobby was nearly empty at this hour. A few foreign businessmen sat with coffee and newspapers, paying no attention to the small boy who casually walked toward the grand piano in the corner. Kwame sat on the bench, his heart pounding with excitement as it always did when his fingers touched real ivory keys. He started softly, playing a traditional Ghanaian folk song his grandmother had taught him, but soon his fingers were dancing across the keys, adding flourishes and variations that came naturally to him. He lost himself in the music, forgetting where he was until a voice broke his concentration. "Who taught you to play like that, young man?" Kwame's hands froze on the keys as he looked up at a tall man in a hotel uniform with a manager's badge. His stomach twisted with fear. He had been caught. "Nobody, sir. I taught myself," he answered truthfully, already sliding off the bench and reaching for his school bag. The manager frowned, but there was curiosity in his eyes. "How old are you?" 12, sir. "And no lessons?" "None at all?" Kwame shook his head. "I practice on paper at home." "I'm sorry for using your piano without permission. I won't do it again." He turned to leave, shoulders hunched, expecting to be scolded, but the manager's next words stopped him. "Wait. Come back tomorrow morning. Our guests enjoy music during breakfast. Perhaps we can arrange something." Kwame's eyes widened. "Really, sir? I can play here?" "For real?" The manager nodded. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." That day, Kwame could barely focus on his lessons. His teacher, Mrs. Owusu, had to call his name 3 times during mathematics. "Kwame Ose, your body is here but your mind is somewhere else today." His best friend Kofi nudged him at lunch. "What's got you so distracted? You haven't even touched your food." Kwame couldn't hold in his excitement any longer. "The manager at Golden Leaf caught me playing the piano this morning." Kofi's eyes grew wide with alarm. "Are you in trouble? Did they call your mother?" "No," Kwame grinned. "He asked me to come back tomorrow to play for the guests during breakfast." "He might even pay me." Kofi's jaw dropped. "No way, that's amazing. Wait until everyone hears about this." When Kwame told his mother that evening, her reaction was mixed. Pride shone in her eyes, but worry creased her brow. "Playing is one thing, but a job. You're still a child, Kwame." "It's not really a job, Mama, just playing for a little while in the mornings. And if they do pay me, I can help with the bills. Maybe save for school fees." Akosua sighed, looking around their small apartment. The paint was peeling and the furniture was old and worn. Times had been harder since Kwame's father left 3 years ago. Every little bit would help, but her son's education came first. You can play at the hotel on one condition. Your grades must stay up. School comes first, always. Do you understand? Kwame nodded eagerly. I promise, Mama. The next morning, Kwame arrived at the Golden Leaf Hotel at exactly 7 o'clock, his school uniform freshly pressed despite its age. The manager, Mr. Darko, was waiting for him. Our guests usually prefer classical music, Mr. Darko said. Can you play Beethoven or Mozart? Kwame's heart sank. He had never learned classical music. I know traditional songs and some popular music I hear on the radio. I can try to learn classical if you show me how it sounds. Mr. Darko seemed doubtful but led him to the piano anyway. Play something you know well. Let's see how our guests respond. Kwame sat at the piano, acutely aware of the few guests already seated for breakfast, some glancing curiously in his direction. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the keys. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. He started with a gentle traditional lullaby his grandmother sang, then seamlessly blended it into a popular high-life song everyone in Ghana knew. His small fingers moved with surprising strength and agility, coaxing both delicate melodies and vibrant rhythms from the grand piano. When he finished, he was startled to hear applause. Opening his eyes, he saw that more guests had arrived and many were smiling and clapping. An older woman approached the piano. That was lovely, young man, she said with an accent Kwame couldn't place. Do you take requests? Before the end of the hour, Kwame had played 5 more songs, including an attempt at a classical piece the woman hummed for him, which he picked up remarkably quickly by ear. When it was time to leave for school, Mr. Darko handed him a small envelope. Come back tomorrow, the manager said, a new respect in his voice. I think we've found our breakfast pianist. Walking to school, Kwame couldn't resist peeking inside the envelope. He gasped at the amount. It was more than his mother made in 2 days of cleaning rooms. With shaking hands, he carefully tucked the money into his sock for safekeeping. Word spread quickly about the young piano prodigy at the Golden Leaf Hotel. Within a week, the breakfast crowd had doubled, many guests specifically requesting a table near the piano. Kwame expanded his repertoire daily, learning new songs by listening to them just once or twice. One morning, a guest left a newspaper on the piano with a flyer advertising music scholarships at Accra's most prestigious art school. Kwame stared at it longingly before folding it into his bag. That evening, he showed the flyer to his mother. The auditions are next month, Mama. The scholarship covers everything, even books and uniforms. Akosua studied the paper, her expression unreadable. This school is for children who have had years of proper training, Kwame. Children from wealthy families. But it says they're looking for natural talent, Kwame insisted. Mr. Darko says I have that. The guests say so too. His mother's eyes softened. She pulled him into a hug. You have more than talent. You have determination. That's even more valuable. She released him and straightened her shoulders. We'll find a way to prepare you for this audition. The next day, Akosua approached Mr. Darko after Kwame's morning performance. My son needs a teacher if he's to have any chance at the music school auditions. Mr. Darko considered this. There's a retired music professor who stays here sometimes. He might be willing to listen to Kwame play. I can't promise anything more. 3 days later, Professor Atta, a stern-looking man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, sat in the hotel lobby listening to Kwame play. His face remained impassive throughout the impromptu recital. When Kwame finished, the professor adjusted his glasses. You've never had formal training? No, sir. And you can't read music? No, sir, but I can learn. Professor Atta made a sound between a grunt and a laugh. Yes, I believe you can. He turned to Akosua. I'm too old to take on students regularly, but this boy has something special. I'll work with him twice a week until the auditions. No charge. Akosua's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir. We can pay something, the professor waved her off. Talent like this comes along rarely. Payment would be an insult, to him and to music itself. For the next month, Kwame divided his time between school, playing at the hotel, and lessons with Professor Atta. The old man was demanding, sometimes making Kwame repeat the same passage 20 times until it was perfect. He taught Kwame to read music, marveling at how quickly the boy grasped concepts that took most students months to understand. "You have a gift," Professor Ada told him during their final lesson before the audition. "But remember, gifts must be respected. Never take your talent for granted. Work harder than everyone else, even though it comes easier to you." On the day of the audition, Kwame wore his best clothes, still humble compared to the other applicants' expensive outfits. Mothers in fine jewelry and fathers in business suits gave him curious looks as he and Akosua, still in her hotel cleaning uniform, found seats in the waiting area. When his name was called, Kwame walked into the audition room, his heart pounding but his steps steady. 5 judges sat behind a table, expressions serious and evaluating. A magnificent grand piano waited in the center of the room. "Whenever you're ready," one judge said, her tone neutral. Kwame sat at the piano, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. And in that moment, as the music flowed from his fingers, the paper keyboard, the hotel lobby piano, the long hours of practice all led to this, his chance to turn a dream into reality. 2 years passed like the quick notes of a piano scale. Kwame, now 14, had transformed from a curious boy with a paper keyboard to one of the most promising young musicians at the Accra Academy of Arts. The scholarship had changed everything, not just access to real pianos and proper training, but a whole new world of possibilities. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, Kwame sat in the school's common room with his friends Kofi and Amma, flipping through a music magazine someone had left behind. "Look at this," Kofi suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a colorful advertisement. "The Blue Note Collective is coming to Accra next month." Kwame's heart skipped a beat. The Blue Note Collective was one of the most famous jazz bands in the world, known for blending traditional African rhythms with modern jazz. Their pianist, Thabo Ndlovu, was Kwame's musical hero. "They're playing at the National Theater," Amma said, reading the details. "For 2 nights only." Kwame stared at the page, tracing the band members' faces with his finger. "I have to see them play," he whispered. Kofi snorted. "Tickets start at 200 cedis. That's more than my father makes in a week." The price was indeed steep. Though Kwame still played occasionally at the Golden Leaf Hotel on weekends, most of that money went toward helping his mother with household expenses. There was never much left over for luxuries. That evening, as Kwame practiced on the upright piano the school had loaned him for home use, his mother noticed his distraction. "You hit 3 wrong notes in that passage," Akosua said, pausing in her mending. "That's not like you. What's on your mind?" Kwame's fingers stilled on the keys. "The Blue Note Collective is coming to Accra next month." "The jazz band? The one whose albums you're always borrowing from the library?" He nodded. "I want to see them more than anything, but the tickets—" He trailed off, embarrassed to even mention the cost. Akosua set down her sewing. Over the past 2 years, life had improved somewhat for them. With Kwame's scholarship covering his education and his weekend playing bringing in extra income, she had been able to cut back to just one job. They had moved to a slightly better apartment, closer to the school. But money was still tight. "How much are the tickets?" she asked. When Kwame told her, she tried to hide her wince. "That's quite expensive." "I know, Mama, it's okay." "I understand we can't afford it." Akosua watched her son return to his practice, his shoulders slightly slumped despite his attempt to appear unbothered. She made a mental note to speak with Mr. Darko at the hotel. Perhaps there might be a way. A week later, Kwame was surprised when his piano teacher, Professor Ada, kept him after class. "I hear the Blue Note Collective will be in town soon," the professor said casually, organizing sheet music. "Yes, sir. At the National Theater." The old man adjusted his glasses. "It so happens I know their manager. We studied together many years ago at a conservatory in Paris." Kwame's eyes widened. "Really?" "Indeed. He calls me whenever the band is in Ghana." Professor Ada paused, looking at Kwame thoughtfully. "They'll be holding rehearsals the day before their first performance. I could arrange for you to observe if you're interested." "Observe their rehearsal?" Kwame could hardly believe his ears. Yes, please, sir. That would be amazing." Professor Ada smiled, a rare occurrence that transformed his stern face. "Consider it done. But I expect your Mozart sonata to be perfect by then." "No excuses. It will be perfect, Professor. I promise." That night, Kwame could barely sleep. Watching the Blue Note Collective rehearse would be even better than seeing the actual performance. He would get to see how they worked, how they built their music from the ground up. The next day, his mother surprised him with her own news. "I spoke with Mr. Darko," she said, trying to keep her face serious though her eyes sparkled with excitement. "The hotel sometimes purchases tickets to cultural events for important guests. He's agreed to buy 2 extra tickets to the Blue Note Collective's show and let us have them at half price." "Mama." Quame jumped up, nearly knocking over his dinner plate. "Really? But that's still a lot of money." "I've been saving a little each week," she admitted. "I was going to use it to buy you new shoes for your birthday, but I think this is more important." Kwame hugged her tightly. Thank you. But wait until you hear Professor Ada is going to let me watch their rehearsal too." Akosua laughed, returning his embrace. "It seems the universe is listening to your wishes, my son." For the next 3 weeks, Kwame practiced harder than ever. His Mozart sonata became flawless, and he even began composing his own piece inspired by the Blue Note Collective's music, but with his own unique touch. The day of the rehearsal finally arrived. Professor Ada met Kwame outside the National Theater, an impressive building with a design inspired by traditional African art forms. "Remember," the professor cautioned as they approached the stage door, "you are here to observe only. These are busy professionals preparing for a performance. Don't interrupt or draw attention to yourself." Kwame nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir." A security guard checked their names against a list, then led them through a maze of corridors until they reached the main auditorium. The space was cavernous, with seating for over 1,500 people. On stage, the band was already setting up their instruments. Kwame recognized them immediately from album covers and magazine photos. There was Thabo Ndlovu at the grand piano, his long fingers running through scales. The drummer, Gabriel Mensah, was adjusting his cymbals. The bassist, the saxophonist, the trumpet player, all legends in their own right. Professor Ada guided Kwame to seats in the 3rd row, close enough to see everything but not so close as to intrude. For the next 2 hours, Kwame sat mesmerized as the band rehearsed their set list, occasionally stopping to refine a particular section or discuss a transition. During a break, when the musicians stepped backstage for refreshments, Professor Ada was called over by a tall man with graying dreadlocks, whom Kwame recognized as the band's manager. "Wait here," the professor instructed. Before walking up to greet his old friend, Kwame watched their animated conversation, noticing how they laughed and clasped each other's shoulders like brothers. After a few minutes, Professor Atta beckoned him over. "Kwame, this is Olivier Baptiste, manager of the Blue Note Collective." The professor turned to his friend. "Olivier, this is the young pianist I was telling you about." The manager extended his hand. "Professor Atta speaks very highly of you, young man. He says you have extraordinary talent." Kwame shook the offered hand, his mouth suddenly dry. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor to meet you." "So you enjoy the band's music?" Olivier asked. "Very much, sir. I've studied all their albums. Mr. Ndlovu's playing has influenced me greatly." The manager nodded approvingly. "Would you like to meet him?" Before Kwame could recover from his shock, Olivier was leading him backstage to a room where the band members were relaxing. Thabo Ndlovu sat in a corner, scribbling notes on sheet music. "Thabo," Olivier called. "There's someone here I'd like you to meet." The pianist looked up, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Hello there. This is Kwame Ose," Olivier explained. "Professor Ada's student." "The one he mentioned?" Thabo set aside his music. "Ah yes, the prodigy." He gestured to a chair nearby. "Sit, young man. Tell me how long you've been playing." For the next 10 minutes, Kwame had the surreal experience of chatting with his musical idol. They discussed favorite composers, practice techniques, and the challenges of blending musical traditions. "Would you like to try my piano?" Thabo suddenly asked, nodding toward the stage. Kwame's heart nearly stopped. Really? I could play your piano?" "Of course, come." Back on stage, Kwame sat at the magnificent grand piano, acutely aware of Thabo standing beside him and other band members watching curiously from various positions. "Play whatever you feel," Thabo encouraged. Kwame closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he began to play the piece he'd been composing, a melody that wove together high-life rhythms with jazz harmonies. His nervousness fell away as the music took over, his fingers finding the keys with confidence born from thousands of hours of practice. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Thabo clapped, joined quickly by the other musicians. "That was your own composition?" Thabo asked. Kwame nodded, breathless with excitement. Impressive. Very impressive. The pianist studied him thoughtfully. You know, we sometimes invite local musicians to join us for a song during our shows. Would you be interested in playing with us tomorrow night? Kwame couldn't believe what he was hearing. Play with the Blue Note Collective? On stage in front of an audience? Thabo laughed. That's generally how concerts work, yes. Yes, of course. I would be honored. Excellent. We'll add your piece to the second half of the program. Be here tomorrow at 5 for a quick run-through before the show. In a daze, Kwame thanked him repeatedly before rejoining Professor Ada, who had been watching the exchange with undisguised pride. Did that really just happen? Kwame asked as they left the theater. Did Thabo and Lovu really invite me to play with them tomorrow? He did indeed, the professor confirmed, and it's well-deserved. Your composition impressed him as it should. But I don't have a ticket for tomorrow night. My mother and I are going to the second show. Professor Ada chuckled. I believe that problem has solved itself. Musicians don't need tickets to perform after all. That evening, Kwame burst into the apartment, startling his mother, who was preparing dinner. Mama, you won't believe what happened. He poured out the story in an excited rush. The rehearsal, meeting Thabo, playing his composition, and the incredible invitation to perform. Akosua listened with wide eyes, her hand pressed to her heart. My son playing with the Blue Note Collective, she whispered. Your father would have been so proud. It was the first time she had mentioned his father without sadness in her voice. Kwame hugged her tightly. Will you come watch me tomorrow night? We can exchange our tickets for tomorrow instead of the second night. Nothing could keep me away, she promised. Nothing in this world. That night, Kwame lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the day's events. From a boy with a paper keyboard to sharing a stage with world-famous musicians, the journey seemed impossible, like something from a dream, yet it was real. Tomorrow night he would play with his heroes. Tomorrow night his music would fill the National Theater. Tomorrow night everything would change. Kwame arrived at the National Theater the next day at exactly 4:30, a full half hour before the time Thabo had told him to be there. He couldn't risk being late for the most important moment of his life. His school uniform was freshly pressed, and he carried his sheet music in a folder Professor Ada had given him. The same security guard from yesterday was at the stage door, but this time he frowned when Kwame approached. Pass, please, the guard said, holding out his hand. I don't have a pass, Kwame explained, his stomach tightening with worry. But Mr. Ndlovu invited me to play with the band tonight. My name is Kwame Ose. The guard's frown deepened. No pass, no entry. Those are the rules. Please, could you just check with someone? Mr. Ndlovu or Mr. Baptiste? They're expecting me. The guard sighed but picked up his phone and made a brief call. After a moment, he hung up and nodded toward the door. Wait inside the first room on the right. Someone will come. Relief flooding through him, Kwame entered and found himself in a small waiting area with a couple of worn sofas. He sat nervously, clutching his folder of music. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At precisely 5 o'clock, the door opened and a harried-looking woman with a clipboard entered. Kwame Ose? She asked, consulting her clipboard. Yes, that's me, he said, jumping to his feet. I'm Lucia, the production assistant. There seems to be some confusion. Mr. Ndlovu mentioned something about a young pianist, but it's not on the program schedule. Kwame's heart sank. He invited me yesterday. During rehearsal. I was supposed to play my composition in the second half. Lucia frowned. That's impossible. The program was finalized weeks ago. We have a sold-out show and every minute is accounted for. She looked at him more closely. How old are you anyway? 14, Kwame admitted. She shook her head. I'm sorry, but there must be a misunderstanding. We can't add an unplanned performance by a child to a professional show. There are union rules, insurance considerations. She trailed off, seeing the devastation on his face. Her tone softened slightly. Look, I'll speak with Mr. Ndlovu when he arrives, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. The show director has final say on the program, and he's very strict about changes. With that, she left Kwame alone in the waiting room. He sat back down, his earlier excitement replaced by a cold knot of disappointment. Had he misunderstood? Had Thabo just been kind, not actually meaning the invitation? Or perhaps the pianist had mentioned it to someone who then rejected the idea. Another 15 minutes passed before the door opened again. This time it was Olivier Baptiste, the manager, accompanied by a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses whom Kwame didn't recognize. "Ah, the young pianist," Olivier said, though his smile seemed strained. "Kwame, this is Richard Klein, the show director." The thin man barely glanced at Kwame. "As I was saying, Olivier, it's simply not possible. The program is set, the timing is precise, and we don't have room for impromptu additions, not to mention the liability issues with putting a minor on stage without proper contracts and releases." "Richard, please," Olivier said quietly. Thabo was very impressed with the boys playing. It would just be for one short piece. "No exceptions," Richard said firmly. "We're professionals. Not a school talent show." He finally looked directly at Kwame. "I'm sorry, young man, but you can enjoy the show from the audience like everyone else." "But I don't have a ticket for tonight," Kwame said, his voice small. "We exchanged ours for tomorrow night when I thought I would be playing." Richard threw up his hands in exasperation. "You see the complications already? No, my decision is final." He turned and left the room. Olivier gave Kwame an apologetic look. "I'm sorry. Richard can be difficult, but he's right about the regulations. Perhaps another time." Left alone again, Kwame felt tears pricking at his eyes. He blinked them back furiously. This was no time for crying. He'd come this far. He couldn't give up now. He would wait for Thabo. Surely the pianist would remember his promise. The minutes ticked by slowly. Through the door, Kwame could hear increasing activity as more people arrived. Stagehands, technicians, other assistants, all rushing past on various errands. No one paid any attention to the boy sitting quietly in the waiting room. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the door burst open and the Blue Note Collective walked in, laughing and talking among themselves. Thabo Ndlovu was in the middle of the group, carrying a leather portfolio similar to the one Kwame had seen him with yesterday. Kwame stood up, his heart pounding. "Mr. Ndlovu." The pianist looked over, confusion crossing his face before recognition dawned. "Kwame, you're here already, good. Mr. Ndlovu, they said I can't play." Kwame blurted out. "The show director said the program is already set and—" Richard said no. Thabo interrupted, frowning. "Wait here." He disappeared, followed by the rest of the band. Kwame sank back onto the sofa. At least Thabo remembered him and seemed upset about the situation. Maybe there was still hope. 20 minutes later, raised voices could be heard from somewhere nearby. Kwame couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clearly argumentative. Then silence fell again. 5 more minutes passed before the door opened once more. Thabo entered, his expression troubled. "I'm sorry, Kwame, Richard won't budge. Says it's too late to change the program and there are legal issues with having you perform without proper paperwork." The last shred of hope withered in Kwame's chest. "I understand," he managed to say. "Thank you for trying." Thabo sat beside him on the sofa. "Richard's always been stubborn, but he has a point about the paperwork. If anything happened, if you got hurt somehow or if there was any other problem, the theater could be liable." He paused, studying Kwame thoughtfully. "But there might be another way." "Another way?" "Come back tomorrow afternoon before the second show. We'll have more time then, and I'll make sure all the proper forms are ready. Your mother would need to sign them, of course." New hope bloomed in Kwame's heart. "Really? You'd still let me play?" "Absolutely. Your composition was too good to pass up." Thabo smiled. "And between us, I think the audience would love to see a young local talent join us on stage." "Thank you, Mr. Ndlovu. Thank you so much." "Call me Thabo, and now I have a show to prepare for. Do you have a ticket for tonight?" Kwame shook his head. "We exchanged ours for tomorrow." "That's easily fixed." Thabo reached into his pocket and handed Kwame a laminated backstage pass. "This will get you into the theater. You can watch from the wings, see how everything works from behind the scenes." Clutching the pass like a precious jewel, Kwame thanked him again. As Thabo turned to leave, he paused at the door. "One more thing. Do you have your music with you?" Kwame held up his folder. "Right here. Good, leave it with me. I'll share it with the band tonight so they can familiarize themselves with it before tomorrow." After Thabo left, Kwame sat for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. Disappointment and hope had chased each other through his heart so many times in the past hour that he felt almost dizzy. But the end result was good, better than good. Not only would he still get to play with the Blue Note Collective, but he would also get to watch tonight's show from backstage. He quickly pulled out his phone, a basic model his mother had bought for emergencies, and called her. "Mama." You won't believe what happened." He poured out the whole story, from the initial rejection to Thabo's promise about tomorrow. "That's wonderful news," his mother said. "But are you sure about this new plan? It sounds like the director doesn't want you to perform." "Thabo says he'll take care of everything. We just need to sign some forms tomorrow. And guess what? I get to watch tonight's show from backstage." "Backstage?" Her voice held a mix of concern and pride. "Be careful, Kwame. Don't get in anyone's way." "I won't, Mama, I promise." When he hung up, Kwame realized he was hungry, with all the excitement he hadn't eaten since breakfast. He wondered if there was somewhere nearby he could get a quick snack before the show started. As if reading his thoughts, the door opened, and Lucia, the production assistant, poked her head in. "Still here? Come on, then. The crew is having dinner before the show. You might as well join them." She led him to a large room where tables had been set up with an assortment of food. Band members, technicians, and various staff were filling plates and chatting. Kwame hesitated at the doorway, suddenly shy. "Go on," Lucia encouraged. "Get something to eat. Everyone here was a beginner once." Kwame filled a plate with rice, grilled chicken, and vegetables, then found a quiet corner to sit. He was halfway through his meal when someone sat down beside him. It was Gabriel Mensah, the band's drummer. "You're the piano kid, right?" Gabriel asked, his deep voice friendly. "Thabo told us about you." "Yes, sir." "I'm Kwame." "No, sir, needed. I'm Gabriel." He nodded toward Kwame's nearly empty plate. "Good appetite. That's important for a musician. Takes energy to perform. Do you get nervous before shows?" Kwame asked. Gabriel laughed. "Every single time. Anyone who says they don't is lying. The day you stop feeling that little flutter in your stomach is the day you should quit." "Really? Even after all these years?" "Especially after all these years. It means you still care, that it still matters." Gabriel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Want to know a secret? The director, Richard, he's nervous too. That's why he's so uptight about changes to the program. He's afraid something will go wrong." Kwame considered this. "So his saying no to me wasn't personal," Gabriel finished. "Just fear talking. But don't worry about tomorrow. We've got your back." After dinner, Gabriel introduced Kwame to the other band members. They asked about his music, his training, his influences. For a blissful hour, Kwame felt like one of them. A real musician among peers, not just a schoolboy with a dream. Then it was time for the show to begin. Lucia positioned Kwame in the wings, close enough to see everything but safely out of the way of the bustling stage crew. "Stay right here," she instructed. "Don't wander, don't touch anything, and absolutely no photos or recordings." From his vantage point, Kwame had a perfect view of the stage and part of the audience. The theater was packed, every seat filled. The anticipation in the air was almost tangible. The house lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. And then, with a single spotlight illuminating Thabo at the piano, the music began. Watching the Blue Note Collective perform was everything Kwame had imagined and more. The way they communicated with subtle nods and glances, the seamless transitions between songs, the perfect balance they maintained even during the most complex passages. It was a masterclass in musicianship. During one particularly powerful number, Thabo glanced toward the wings and caught Kwame's eye. The pianist smiled and gave a small nod as if to say, "Tomorrow this will be you too." Kwame stood straighter, filled with determination. Tomorrow he would be ready. Tomorrow nothing would stand in his way. Kwame barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the stage, the lights, the audience. He imagined himself sitting at that magnificent grand piano, the band behind him ready to play his composition. The thought sent waves of excitement and terror crashing through him in equal measure. By morning, his mother found him already dressed and practicing finger exercises at their small kitchen table. "Did you sleep at all?" Akosua asked, yawning as she put the kettle on for tea. "A little," Kwame admitted. "I keep thinking about tonight. Nervous?" He nodded, his fingers still moving in silent patterns across the tabletop. "That's normal," she said, sitting beside him. "Even the greatest musicians feel nervous before important performances. That's what Gabriel, the drummer, told me last night. He said the day you stop feeling nervous is the day you should quit." Akosua smiled. "Wise man." She took his restless hands in hers. "Kwame, I want you to know something. Whatever happens tonight, whether you play perfectly or make mistakes, whether the audience cheers or not, I am already so proud of you. Your determination, your passion, these things matter more than any single performance." Her words settled something in him, a foundation beneath the swirling emotions. Thank you, Mama. After breakfast, Kwame tried to distract himself by helping with household chores, but his mind kept drifting back to the music. By noon, he couldn't stand it anymore. I'm going to walk to the theater, he announced, just to make sure everything is still on for tonight. Akosua looked up from her sewing. It's hours before you need to be there. I know, but I'll feel better once I check. And I can practice in one of the schoolrooms on the way back. His mother studied him for a moment, then nodded. Take your phone. Call me if there's any change of plans. The walk to the National Theater took longer than usual because Kwame kept stopping to review parts of his composition in his head. What if he'd made it too complicated? What if the band didn't like it after all? What if he froze on stage and couldn't remember the notes? By the time he arrived, his shirt was damp with sweat despite the mild day. At the stage door, a different security guard was on duty. Pass? The woman asked, not unkindly. I don't have one for today, Kwame explained. But Mr. Ndlovu, Thabo, from the Blue Note Collective asked me to come. I'm playing with them tonight. The guard raised an eyebrow. Playing with them? Yes, my name is Kwame Ose. There should be some paperwork for my mother to sign. The guard checked her clipboard, flipping through several pages. Kwame's heart sank as she frowned and shook her head. No Kwame Ose on my list. No paperwork for a minor performer either. But Mr. Ndlovu promised. Please, could you check with him or Mr. Baptiste? The band isn't here yet. They're not due until 4. She glanced at her watch. That's over 3 hours from now. Kwame's shoulders slumped. Had Thabo forgotten? Had the director overruled him again? The guard, seeing his expression, softened slightly. Look, I can't let you in without authorization, but I can make a note that you stopped by. When Mr. Ndlovu arrives, I'll tell him you were here. Thank you, Kwame said. Though his voice lacked conviction, he turned to leave, unsure what to do next. As he stepped away from the door, a familiar voice called his name. Kwame. Just the person I was hoping to see. It was Lucia, the production assistant from yesterday, hurrying toward him with her ever-present clipboard. I was just at your school looking for you, she said, slightly out of breath. Professor Atta said you might have come here already. Is everything okay? Am I still playing tonight? Yes, but there's been a slight change of plans. The director, Richard, still isn't happy, but Thabo insisted. They've compromised. She handed him an envelope. These are the forms your mother needs to sign. Bring them back with you at 4. You'll do a quick rehearsal with the band, then perform one piece, your composition, right before the intermission. Relief washed over Kwame. So it's really happening. It's really happening, Lucia confirmed with a small smile. Though between us, Richard is having kittens about it. Says he's never broken protocol like this before. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kwame clutched the envelope to his chest. Don't thank me. Thank Thabo. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Lucia checked her watch. I've got to run. 1,000 things to do before tonight. Remember, be back here at 4 sharp with those signed forms. Kwame practically flew home, his earlier doubts forgotten. When he burst through the door waving the envelope, his mother looked up in surprise. It's happening, Mama. I'm really going to play with them tonight. Akosua listened as he explained the new arrangement, her face a mix of joy and concern. These forms, what do they say? Together they read through the paperwork. Parental consent forms, liability waivers, even a simple contract specifying that Kwame would receive a small payment for his performance. They're paying you? Akosua asked, her eyes wide. I guess so, Kwame said, equally surprised. I didn't even think about that part. His mother shook her head in wonder as she signed the forms. From paper keyboard to paid performer. Your journey continues to amaze me, my son. At exactly 4 o'clock, Kwame and his mother presented themselves at the stage door. This time they were expected. The guard checked Akosua's ID, made sure all the forms were properly signed, then waved them through. Backstage was a hive of activity, even more hectic than the previous night. Technicians adjusted lighting, stagehands moved equipment, and various assistants rushed about with determined expressions. Lucia appeared through the chaos and led them to a small room where the Blue Note Collective was gathering. Thabo greeted them warmly. Kwame, and this must be your mother. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Ose. The pleasure is mine, Akosua said, clearly a bit starstruck. Thank you for this opportunity for my son. The talent is his own, Thabo replied. We're just giving him a stage to share it. He turned to Kwame. Ready to rehearse? We've all looked at your composition and have some ideas for the arrangement. For the next hour, Kwame worked with the band, refining his piece. They suggested small changes here and there, an extended intro, a different chord progression in the bridge, a call and response section between piano and saxophone. With each adjustment, the music grew stronger, richer, more powerful. Gabriel, the drummer, grinned as they finished a complete run-through. "This kid can write, Thabo, really write. Told you," Thabo said with satisfaction. "The audience will love it." A sharp knock interrupted them, and Richard, the director, stuck his head in. 5 minutes until places, he announced, his tone clipped. His eyes fell on Kwame. "I assume all the paperwork is in order." "All signed and filed," Lucia assured him from nearby. Richard nodded stiffly. "Fine. But if anything goes wrong..." He left the threat hanging as he withdrew. "Ignore him," Gabriel whispered to Kwame. "That's just his way of saying good luck." As the band prepared to take the stage, Lucia showed Akosua to her seat, a prime spot in the center of the third row. "We'll bring Kwame out for his piece just before intermission," she explained. "After he plays, he can join you in the audience for the second half if he wants." Once his mother had gone, Kwame felt a fresh wave of nerves. This was really happening. In less than an hour, he would be performing his own composition with the Blue Note Collective in front of a sold-out crowd. "Breathe," Thabo advised, noticing his expression. "Remember why you play music in the first place. Not for the audience, not for the applause, but for the joy of creating something beautiful." Kwame nodded, trying to slow his racing heart. From the wings, he watched as the band took the stage to enthusiastic applause. Just like the previous night, they began with Thabo alone in the spotlight, playing a haunting melody that gradually built as the other musicians joined in. The first half of the show passed in a blur for Kwame. He was too nervous to fully appreciate the music, his mind running through his own piece over and over, imagining all the ways it could go wrong. Then suddenly Lucia was beside him, straightening his collar. 2 minutes, she whispered. "Ready?" He wasn't sure he was, but he nodded anyway. On stage, Thabo was addressing the audience. "Tonight we have a special treat for you," he was saying. "We've invited a young local musician to join us. At just 14 years old, he's already composing music that blends traditional Ghanaian rhythms with jazz harmonies in a way that, frankly, impressed us all." A murmur of interest ran through the crowd. "Please welcome to the stage, Kwame Osei." Lucia gave him a gentle push. "Go." His legs feeling like jelly, Kwame walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding, making it impossible to see the audience clearly, though he knew his mother was out there watching proudly. Thabo shook his hand, then guided him to the piano. "It's all yours," he said with an encouraging smile. Kwame sat on the bench, adjusting its height. The keys gleamed under the stage lights, inviting his touch. He placed his hands in position, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes rang out clear and true. Then Gabriel's drums joined in, setting the rhythm. The saxophone added a wistful melody line. The bass provided a strong foundation. And just like that, Kwame wasn't alone anymore. He was part of something larger, his music brought to life by these incredible musicians who had somehow seen something special in him. His nervousness melted away as the music took over. His fingers found the keys with certainty and his body swayed with the rhythm. In that moment, there was no audience, no theater, no pressure, just the pure joy of creation. As they approached the final section, Thabo caught his eye and nodded, signaling a slight change to the arrangement they had discussed during rehearsal. Kwame understood immediately. He shifted to a more percussive style, leaving space for Thabo to add flourishes on a second keyboard. The two pianists, one a world-famous master, the other a 14-year-old newcomer, traded phrases back and forth, each building on what the other had played, creating something new and unexpected in the moment. The audience, sensing they were witnessing something special, leaned forward in their seats. When the piece reached its powerful conclusion, there was a beat of silence, that magical pause that comes when listeners are too moved to immediately react. Then the applause erupted, people rising to their feet. Kwame sat frozen at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. Thabo stepped forward and gestured for him to stand, to acknowledge the audience's appreciation. On shaky legs, Kwame rose and bowed, the way Professor Ada had taught him. The applause grew even louder. Someone whistled. From the front rows came shouts of "Bravo" and "Encore." Gabriel came forward and clapped him on the back. The saxophonist shook his hand. The entire band surrounded him, sharing in the moment of triumph. As the applause finally began to fade, Thabo spoke into the microphone once more. "Kwame Ose, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that name? I have a feeling we'll all be hearing it for many years to come." Kwame bowed once more, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. As he left the stage to rejoin his mother for the second half, he caught sight of Richard, the director, standing in the wings. To his surprise, the stern man gave him a small nod of approval. In that moment, Kwame knew his life had changed forever. From a boy with a paper keyboard to a composer and performer who had earned the respect of professional musicians, the journey had been incredible. And somehow he knew it was just the beginning. The next morning, Kwame woke to the sound of his phone buzzing repeatedly. Bleary-eyed, he reached for it and found dozens of notifications flooding his screen. Messages from classmates, alerts from social media accounts he rarely used, even emails from addresses he didn't recognize. "Mama?" he called out, sitting up in confusion. "What's happening?" Akoshua appeared in his doorway, her expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Someone recorded your performance last night. It's everywhere online." "What?" But they said no recordings allowed. She handed him her own phone, open to a video on a popular social media platform. The view count was already over 50,000. The caption read, "14-year-old piano prodigy stuns audience performing with Blue Note Collective in Accra." Kwame watched a shaky but clear video of himself at the piano, playing alongside Thabo and the band. The final moments of the piece were there, followed by the standing ovation, and Thabo's words, "Remember that name. I have a feeling we'll all be hearing it for many years to come." "This is crazy," Kwame whispered. "How did it spread so fast?" "The Blue Note Collective shared it on their official page early this morning," his mother explained. "They called you the future of African jazz. People are asking who you are, where you study, if you have more music available." Before Kwame could process this information, his phone rang. It was Professor Atta. "Have you seen it?" the professor asked without preamble when Kwame answered. "The video?" "Yes, just now." "I had no idea." "It's extraordinary exposure," Professor Atta interrupted. "I've already received calls from 3 different music schools asking about you, including the Royal Academy in London." "London?" Kwame repeated, stunned. "They're offering a full scholarship, room, board, tuition, everything. They want you to audition next month." The room seemed to spin around Kwame. "But London is so far, and expensive. We could never afford—" "Didn't you hear me?" "Full scholarship. They'll cover the flights for the audition too." The professor's voice softened slightly. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Kwame, the kind most musicians only dream about." After promising to discuss it with his mother and call back later, Kwame hung up and sat in silence for a moment. London, the Royal Academy of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. What did Professor Atta want? His mother asked, sitting beside him on the bed. When Kwame told her about the scholarship offer, Akoswa's hand flew to her mouth. "London?" she whispered. "That's halfway across the world." "I know. It's too far. I can't leave you, Mama." She took his hands in hers. "Listen to me, Kwame. When your father left, I promised myself I would do everything possible to give you opportunities. If this is your chance to become the musician you're meant to be, we will find a way. But what about you? Who will help with the rent? With groceries? I survived before you were old enough to work at the hotel," she reminded him with a gentle smile. "I can manage again. This is not a burden you should carry." Before they could discuss it further, Kwame's phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Is this Kwame Ose?" asked a woman with an accent Kwame couldn't quite place. "Yes, that's me." "Wonderful. My name is Nadia Chen. I'm the director of the Global Young Musicians Foundation. I saw your performance with the Blue Note Collective online, and I'm very impressed." "Thank you," Kwame said, still bewildered by all the attention. "Our foundation provides support to exceptional young musicians from around the world. We'd like to discuss establishing a music program in your community, with you as our first scholar." "A music program? In my neighborhood?" "Yes. We believe talent can be found everywhere, but opportunity cannot. We want to change that. Would you and your mother be available to meet tomorrow to discuss the details? After arranging a meeting time and hanging up, Kwame explained the call to his mother. They want to start a music program here, for kids like me who can't afford lessons or instruments. Akoswa's eyes filled with tears. Your talent is opening doors not just for you, but for others too. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calls, messages, and visitors. Kofi Anama came by, buzzing with excitement about the video. Professor Atta stopped in with more details about the London scholarship. Even Mr. Darko from the Golden Leaf Hotel appeared with flowers and congratulations. By evening, Kwame was exhausted but still riding a wave of disbelief. "Is this really happening, Mama?" he asked as they sat down to a simple dinner. "Yesterday I was just a student. Now people are talking about scholarships and music programs, and it's overwhelming. Life can change in an instant," she said. "Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes, like now, for the better. The important thing is to stay grounded. Remember who you are and where you came from." The next day, Kwame and his mother met with Nadia Chen at a quiet cafe near their apartment. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Our foundation believes music education should be accessible to all children with passion and potential," she explained. "We'd like to establish a program here in Accra, providing instruments, instruction, and performance opportunities to young people who might otherwise never have the chance." "That sounds wonderful," Akosua said. "But what does this have to do with Kwame?" "We need a local success story, someone the children can look up to. Kwame would be our ambassador and eventually perhaps a mentor or even a teacher." Nadia smiled at him. "Your journey from paper keyboard to performing with world-class musicians is exactly the kind of inspiration these children need." "I'd be honored," Kwame said. "But I might be going to London. For school? The Royal Academy?" "Yes, Professor Atta mentioned their interest." Nadia nodded approvingly. "That would be perfect, actually. You could train at one of the world's finest institutions, then bring that knowledge back to share with the next generation." They spent the next hour discussing plans for the music program, how it would be structured, where it would be housed, how students would be selected. By the end of the meeting, it was decided that the program would begin in 3 months, regardless of whether Kwame went to London or not. "We'll need a name for the program," Nadia said as they were wrapping up. "Any suggestions?" Kwame thought for a moment. "What about paper to piano? Since that's how I started." Nadia smiled. "Perfect. It captures the journey beautifully." In the weeks that followed, Kwame's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The Royal Academy confirmed his scholarship after a virtual audition, where he performed his composition and several classical pieces. Arrangements were made for him to move to London at the start of the next term, with his mother accompanying him for the first month to help him settle in. The Blue Note Collective invited him to join them for the final 3 performances of their African tour. Under Thabo's guidance, Kwame refined his composition and learned several of the band's standard pieces. Audiences in Nairobi, Cape Town, and Cairo gave him standing ovations, and music critics began to take notice of the young pianist with the unique blend of traditional and jazz influences. Meanwhile, the paper-to-piano program took shape in Kwame's neighborhood. An abandoned community center was renovated to house practice rooms and classrooms. Instruments were donated or purchased with foundation funds. Local musicians were hired as instructors, with Professor Atta serving as the artistic director. The night before Kwame was to leave for London, a special concert was held to officially launch the program. The renovated community center was packed with people, neighbors, classmates, teachers, and many children who had already signed up for lessons. On stage, a row of upright pianos gleamed under the lights, real instruments that would soon help other young musicians begin their journeys. As Kwame stepped up to play, he spotted his mother in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. "1 year ago," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion he felt. "I was practicing on a paper keyboard because we couldn't afford a real one. I thought that was normal, just the way things were for kids like me." He ran his fingers lightly over the keys of the piano before him. "But music has a way of finding paths we never imagined, thanks to my mother's sacrifice, my teacher's belief in me, and some incredible opportunities. I'm going to study at the Royal Academy in London." A murmur of appreciation ran through the crowd, But I'm not the only one with talent and dreams, Kwame continued. In this very room, there are children who might become the next great composers, performers, or music teachers, if they have the chance to learn. That's what the Paper to Piano program is all about, giving that chance to everyone, not just those who can afford it. He smiled at the rows of eager young faces watching him. I'll be back next summer to see how you're all doing, and in a few years maybe some of you will join me on stages around the world. With that, he began to play. Not his competition piece or any of the complex jazz numbers he'd performed with the Blue Note Collective, but a simple Ghanaian folk song, the first music he had ever loved. As the familiar melody filled the room, he thought about how far he had come and the incredible journey that still lay ahead. From a paper keyboard drawn on the back of an old poster to the Royal Academy of Music in London. From practicing in secret to performing with world-famous musicians. From a boy with an impossible dream to a young man helping others achieve their own dreams. As the final notes faded, Kwame looked out at the audience and saw his mother wiping away tears. Beside her sat Professor Atta, nodding in approval. In the back of the room stood Thabo Ndlovu, who had flown in specially for this event. The applause that erupted was deafening. But even more powerful was the knowledge that this was just the beginning, not just for Kwame, but for all the children who would follow the path he had helped create. In that moment, surrounded by music and possibility, Kwame knew with absolute certainty that some dreams are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they might seem, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the chance to help others discover their own gifts.